Yeah, I had two going at the same time, so I fixed it.
All right. Well, let's get into this. Anti-capitalism is anti-vegan. Let's check it out. Ready?
I'm so excited.
Let's watch.
That anti-capitalist sentiment is inherently anti-vegan. A couple months ago, I did a Q&A, and one of the questions was about my political ideology, and I was asked if I considered myself neoliberal, and I said, yeah, I would consider myself neoliberal. And then I kind of gave a little bit more detail, expanded on that a bit in a follow-up Q&A, because the comments on the first one, people were kind of mad at me. It ranged from people confusing neoliberalism.
I want to pause on this. First of all, how rare is it for someone to actually identify as neoliberal? Like, I know there's a lot of, people who, there's like a whole subreddit of people who identify as neoliberal, but you rarely see this, you know?
I've gotten into, James, I think you know this guy, but there's like a libertarian guy who I, would like go to the same bar as sometimes. And I used to work for him actually, but he, we'd get into arguments about this stuff, and one of his gotchas would be that no one actually calls themselves a neoliberal. It doesn't exist. Which,
really?
I mean, is a bad argument for several reasons, but
here's the thing though, and here's the reason this is happening now, is because leftists use the term neoliberal so loosely that liberals hear it and think it just means very liberal.
Yes. Okay. So let's watch a little bit more, because I totally agree. She gets into it.
I guarantee when she explains her political ideology, it will not be about reducing government interference in the capitalist free market. It will be
I'm just all about veganism is all about structural adjustment policies for the global south.
Yeah. So this comment that she's quoting here, she only flashes it on screen. This is somebody responding to her Q&A. This is really strange to me. She earlier talked about liking Ayn Rand growing up, but that she eventually grew out of her edgy teenage phase and changed her mind. Doesn't seem like she did. Calling yourself a neoliberal when you're so outspoken about the environment, climate change, and the suffering of animals is beyond me. Unregulated capitalism is sucking the life out of our planet, which is exactly what we should be fighting against. You don't do that by supporting the status quo. Great comment.
Yeah, it's got 25 likes.
That's really good. Yeah, that comment is much better than this entire video. So let's just keep going. See what she thinks. She gives a definition of neoliberalism that I think is illuminating.
And vegetarianism, they're not the same thing. To kind of you're dead to me type comments for not opposing capitalism, even equating it to fascism, even saying that it was inconsistent with veganism. So I wanted to address it, the kind of extreme anti-capitalist sentiment, and how that relates to veganism. Shouldn't be controversial. For those who don't know, neoliberal is your typical left-leaning social progressive, but also...
No! So yes, this is exactly what you're talking about, Thoughtslime. Leftists, we as leftists use neoliberal too much, to the point where we criticize neoliberal politicians for using, woke kind of identity politics to hide the fact that they're actually, they have horrible policies for the lower class, and they're oh, look, Kamala Harris is, the first African-American vice president kind of thing. But it's so people who aren't leftists see leftists criticize that, and they're well, I actually think that it's good that we finally have an African-American vice president. I guess I must be a neoliberal, right?
Exactly.
That's
exactly
where...
And I think furthermore, it's not simply that leftists use the word too much, but that it is specifically used in that context of criticizing liberal identity politics, as though that is itself what neoliberal is. To be neoliberal means to be hyper woke, and it has nothing to do with deregulation and exploitation and
privatization and it's unfortunate, because I think that it is worth criticizing this kind of cynical use of identity politics, for lack of a better term here. But neoliberal that's not really neoliberal.
No.
Right? It's just
we had
there's a germ of truth to it, right? There's a germ of truth to it, which is that the thing you criticize them for is being neoliberal, and the insincerity of their identity politics. Because in reality, having like more women in positions of power. Like that's, I guess, a good thing. But the fact of the matter is, like, Kamala Harris has a bunch of terrible policies that are going to hurt people, and that's the thing we're criticizing.
Yeah, like Amazing Wolf Skeptic in the chat. Would you consider Kamala Harris to be a neoliberal? I would say absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
There's no one in mainstream American politics who I would not call a neoliberal.
Right. Yeah.
With the possible exception of like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah, Ilhan, and
when it comes to like stuff like diversity or like like inclusion or like more women in power and stuff, I think Citations Need had like a great episode where they talked about this, where they gave like such a good explanation of like the like diversity, which was that it should be a measurement, not a goal. The goal should be justice. It should be anti-racism. It should be the abolition of like unjust inequalities. And like diversity is a measurement of it, because in a society where there were no sexist inequalities, you would expect to see just as many women as men in like all these fields. But because like it shouldn't just be that we fix that, but get rid of the actual problem, or like without getting rid of the actual problem.
We've already given this position so much more nuance than I feel she is going to give her entire video.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was also just going to say, like, we've, Matt, I'm not sure if you know, like, John the Duncan, who's in the chat. He's a YouTuber who is doing his PhD studying neoliberalism. We had him on a little while ago, and he sort of talked about how, like, like, in fairness, it is difficult to disentangle all of the things that, like we do use neoliberalism too loosely, and I do especially, am sus about people who, like, only attack libs and, like, call it, like, neoliberalism, and it's like, this is just updated versions of, like, SJW cringe compilations, but, like, in fairness to that... sorry, go ahead.
The people who turn neoliberalism into some culture war bullshit.
Yeah. Like, in fairness, though, like, we are living under neoliberalism, and so everything is kind of neoliberal. And, we're criticizing the air that we breathe.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. John the Dunk in the chat, PhD in neoliberalism, here says, I think neoliberalism has used Trump to recuperate its image, despite the fact that Trump is still neoliberal. Yes, that's so true. Like, it's framed as fascist versus neoliberalism, but you can be both. You can be a neoliberal fascist. It's not. I believe isn't the term privatization from
literally coined to describe Nazi economic policy?
I mean, I've gotten into arguments with like like when I was like first starting my channel, I made like an Instagram post of like making fun of Jordan Peterson, got into this long debate with this guy who is I would say pretty close to fascism, if not like at least just like pretty close to alt-right or like alt-right for sure.
Same thing,
he was basically like fully a massive fan of structural adjustment policies, and anything that like economically would be considered neoliberalism, he was a massive fan of.
No, I mean, neoliberal has more of a specific definition, but I mean, it's not a contradiction to call both Democrats and Republicans neoliberals. They both are. All right, let's keep watching this video. We're only a minute in. Keep going.
Being pro-free market with few restrictions on a lot of industries
over something,
like
let me just go back a bit.
Shouldn't be controversial. For those who don't know, neoliberal is like your typical left-leaning social progressive, but also being generally pro-free market with few restrictions on a lot of industries like housing, but also very pro-welfare state, as libertarians would say. Neoliberals want a substantial safety net.
It's so wrong. Like, I'm sorry, we have to pause this.
What?
She's more describing like a social democracy, right? Would that be more?
Yeah.
What she's saying? Basically, she's like, well, I don't totally hate capitalism, so I must be a neoliberal. But I don't want to destroy capitalism.
Again, she just thinks it means very liberal in the American sense, right? Like. A strong welfare state is the antithesis of neoliberalism. Like it's
no, it's really really
wild.
Incorrect.
It's wild. How do you not just check the Wikipedia article?
Yeah, it doesn't take much time. Yeah, it's a very wrong definition said so confidently. That's the problem.
Like, and
Often even
I'm so curious where she got this
like
definition. Like, it
healthcare,
feels like it's just like from like I did some research. I got ratioed a bunch on Twitter. That's
Uh-huh.
And that was her research.
It's wild.
It's not all neoliberals do. Of course, there's going to be disagreement when the private options aren't serving the public. Conservatives often accuse neoliberals of being socialists because they accuse everyone of being socialist.
Oh my God.
Advocating for higher taxation, welfare. But ultimately, the wealth in society that funds that welfare is generated by capitalist mechanisms.
Okay. I just so much
ridiculous.
there.
It's ridiculous.
First of all, conservatives are neoliberal. I just really want her to understand that, like, neoliberal does not mean very liberal. It does not mean like progressive and tolerant. And secondly, capitalism does not create wealth. Labor creates wealth. Like,
that's true. Capitalism gives wealth to a small section of society, made even smaller by neoliberal policies. Amazing Wolf Skeptic, give her credit on one thing. It is true that conservatives call neoliberals socialists. Technically, that is true because conservatives call Joe Biden a socialist. But that's not because he's a neoliberal. That's just because there's two neoliberal parties and they fight each other as if they don't have the same goals in the end.
But it is technically right, but it's also framing it in a very dishonest way because conservatives call neoliberal socialists, but conservatives also are neoliberals. Yeah. Like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher basically invented neoliberalism, and they are conservatives.
Yeah.
So like it's not a battle between neoliberals and conservatives. It's neoliberals versus everyone else.
Yes, true. Will HK, inside of you are two neoliberals. Yeah. Inside of you are two wolves. One Democrat, the other Republican. Yeah, they both fundamentally represent the same interests.
Well, it's very interesting because it's like it does really regulate. It really gives conservatives a lot of credit, like sort of that they're or like it assumes that they're very honest about their like sort of populist like rhetoric, which is I don't know, like. It's just so rough seeing where it's like, no, like the conservatives are right. They're like populists and we're technocrats. And that's what like, it just,
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Democratic Party's obsession with, the professional class and being like, Joe Biden has picked all these people with degrees. Oh, they're all so smart.
Because like the Republicans are like absolutely neoliberals, but like the way she's framing it, it almost sounds like she's like actually believes that they're populists and that like it almost like she's like they just think like whatever dumb idiot people think is right, where like their voters think is right, whereas we're too smart for that.
Yeah, we're only like a minute and a half into this.
Oh yeah,
let's keep watching.
Is the case in what people call European socialism, which isn't really social by definition.
True.
Still relies on profit motive, still has private ownership, even if a few select industries are publicly owned. Since socialism is commonly defined as like a transitional state to communism being the goal, I'm going to talk about focus on
communism. I'm sorry, but that's not. That is.
Yeah, that's not the definition.
I'm not even going to get into it.
That is an incorrect definition.
There are definitely people who believe that, but that is not like the definition that most socialists would.
That's like the Marxist-Leninist, like, the transitory state to the stateless, classless, moneyless society. But that's not what all socialists want. That's not what everyone who's a socialist.
Yeah.
That's definitely not the definition of socialism. What bugs me is how confident she is and how many subscribers she fucking has. God.
I mean, one thing that I'm like curious to sort of keep in mind throughout this is wondering whether like if this is like I don't think actually that this is like grifterism. Like this is like I feel like this is very sincere.
No. Ignorant.
It's just very ignorant.
This is like you said before, Sam, like she got ratioed on Twitter and this is her like defense of herself. And so I just checked. She has 264,000 subscribers. She has more than 250,000 subscribers, and she's saying this to them. So just brutal. All right, let's keep going.
On communism here. So why are neoliberals generally pro-free market and anti-communism? Is the question I want to answer. Philosophy is essential when it comes to ethics, but you can't just like think really hard to figure out empirical facts, right? Like when it comes to economics and economic policies and which actually work in practice, which result in a functioning system that promotes a GDP that's conducive to human well-being. You can think of GDP, in which it is wrong for one person to ever profit off the work of another person. You can call that exploitation, but in order to put that into practice, you have to just not care about the consequences at all. You would have to ignore all of the times communism has been tried and all of the times it has failed, which is every single time it's been tried, it has failed. God. It has caused immeasurable suffering and death. I'm a consequentialist. I care about consequences in terms of suffering.
Do we want to we can't go through this.
There's so much.
There's so much, but I mean,
we could pause it. Like every word she says, we could pause it and talk about it.
I understand why this argument is compelling to people, but at the same time, it's like saying like, well, every time there was a slave revolt, it failed. So obviously, you're not proposing an alternative to slavery. You know?
Yeah, obviously.
Just because we haven't accomplished an end to this problem doesn't mean it's not a problem. Like.
Yeah, true. Yeah. It's like, look what happened to Haiti when they slave revolted. Do we want the whole world to be like that? That's why we should have slaves.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and also, I mean, like, I'm sure, we're all aware of this, but just bears saying that her defining a country doing well by how good its GDP is wild.
That is neoliberal.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Milton Friedman shit. That's like fucking Milton Friedman calling the Chilean miracle when Pinochet took over. He's like, oh, it's a miracle. Their GDP went up. A lot of people were tortured and killed, but it's a miracle.
Well, it's. She talks about how if you're going to change anything, you have to ignore the consequences of it, as though there are no consequences in the current system, as though nobody is suffering in the current system. You know, how many fucking homeless people do you think she sees in the run of a day? You know, and to say that if we change something, there could be consequences. We'd have to deal with that. But 11% of the world population is starving right now.
It's like, but no other country has done a secret coup on us, so we must have the best system.
Well, I mean, citation needed on that one. Looks like we're getting closer and closer.
Yeah, no, that's
Italy rigged the vote.
That's true.
So
yeah, Italy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, let's keep going.
Oh fuck.
They're more about having a job, helping their family, than they do about some abstract principle that says it's wrong for their bosses to make a profit off of their labor. And I care more about what people want than I do deciding what people want for them or what I think is better for them based on some sort of cosmic justice. Injustice in and of itself is not harm. It's only harm when the consequences of injustice harm people or sentient beings. And that harm can range from material.
Wait, what does that mean? Injustice in and of itself is not harm? What? How is that? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, it's not harm. Well, injustice in and of itself does not harm her, I think is the missing sentence there.
I see injustice every day, but I feel fine.
Yeah, injustice happens all the time, but it very rarely affects me. In those cases, I'm very much opposed to it.
I guess I'm not as educated in philosophy as you guys. Can you give me a first grade vernacular? What consequentialism? Is she even close to what that is?
I mean, I'm certainly not the person to ask. I think that this is like, I mean, in a very abstract sense, in the way that she's framing it, if you like accepted all of her framing devices, I think kind of like her thing is, I guess, like, yeah, like whatever the consequences of like these actions are. I think it is very essentially like ends justify the means.
Yeah,
but I mean, I'm
sometimes injustice can be good. Hot take.
Okay.
Sometimes injustice can help people and causes more happiness and less suffering.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's also the idea of like, well, most people are just concerned with surviving, so they don't actually want like a more equal society.
Yeah, John Duggan. No, see, she's taking Marx
to help them survive. It's like, even if you took her at her own logic, like the idea that people are just focused on the day to day, like they're focused on the problems in their life, so they don't want to solve the problems in their life.
Mm-hmm.
They're too busy dealing with the problems.
Also, I mean, couldn't you very much use that same logic as an argument against veganism? Most people just care about putting food on the table. They don't care if that food was made by animals or comes from animals or not.
Yeah.
You might feel that that's unjust, but is it harmful?
No? Yeah, like actually, this is actually worth, remarking upon. Like this she's a vegan, for ethical reasons, and veganism is a philosophical choice to cause the least amount of suffering through her, choices in life. Like, shouldn't she be more sympathetic to, socialist ideas, you would think, with this kind of mindset? Like, it's very strange to me that she would be.
I cannot wait to find out why socialism is actually anti-vegan. That is
yes.
That's going to be great.
Anti-capitalism. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's just keep going.
Let's power through.
More of this cancer.
Material harm, lead in your water being shot, to immaterial harm like damaged self-esteem. There may be some level of inevitable harm there when we're talking about capitalism. I'm sure there is. But that only matters if there is an alternative that is better, that if the harm that capitalism causes is worse than some sort of evidence-based alternative. But there is no evidence-based alternative. Or there is one.
Fuck. Shit.
Is worse than some sort of evidence.
I mean,
we're right at the exact right spot.
I was just going to say that, like that, okay, that is, I feel like her argument is less like she's still wrong, but I feel like that is at least a less like contradictory argument than what I had thought before.
I mean, when she talks about evidence-based blah blah blah, she is kind of describing means testing and actual neoliberalism there for a second.
There is so much that's still wrong with her, but like at least it seems
at least it's less contradictory.
Like I want to be at least like fair to her in that like her argument seems to be that she doesn't think that like there is means-tested way of getting rid of the problems of capitalism, while with veganism there is.
Well, what is means-tested?
But then the conclusion would therefore be that veganism is anti-capitalist, not that anti-capitalism is anti-vegan.
Yeah.
No.
So if the point is that veganism ameliorates the damage of capitalism, then she could make the argument that veganism is required for anti-capitalism. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I think that's not an unusual take among anti-capitalists.
Yeah, no, exactly. Okay, all right. I mean, like I think she's more of a social democrat at the end of the day. She just doesn't know what she's talking about.
She is, but she does have this smugness of a neoliberal down, for sure.
Absolutely.
I honestly, I'm putting my money on K-Hive.
She also has the same glasses as Milton Friedman, so that's.
That is true. That is evidence.
Evidence-based narrative, but there is no evidence.
Like, I'm a neoliberal, which means I wear square-shaped glasses like this.
Based alternative, or there is one, but the evidence goes in the opposite direction. Talking about ending capitalism because of the inevitable harms without some solution, without something that actually works better, is like talking about ending food because food on some level is inevitably harmful.
What? Wait, I don't even understand that at all. What? Wear and tear, aging, oxidative stress, etc. Wait, what?
Food doesn't cause aging.
Food doesn't cause.
Yeah, I would argue that
food doesn't cause any of these things.
If someone doesn't eat for a week, I feel like they come out a lot. They look a lot older.
They age quicker.
Yeah.
Wear and tear, I can see. Like, it causes wear and tear to your teeth, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't eat anymore. My teeth are getting, It does cause. Yeah, that's true.
That is such a clumsy analogy.
What is oxidative stress? But you know what it is though? It's like what's that book? Capitalist Realism, and it's like it's easier to imagine an end of a world than an end of capitalism. So she's like, yeah, getting rid of capitalism is like getting rid of food. It's like fundamental.
Also, that quote is Frederick Jameson, not
is that Frederick Jameson?
Yeah.
Oh, whoops.
My boy. It's my favorite.
But okay, cool. I've been called out.
Also, I think it's interesting that she hasn't said what she thinks capitalism is, because there have been human societies without capitalism, but to my knowledge, there's never been one without food.
Breatharians?
Breatharians, that's true. I don't know if there's been like a breatharian commune. That would have been.
I mean, I think that they're like they do basically start cults. I watched some video about them, but yeah,
I'm also fascinated by those guys.
All of them have
right?
been exposed as pictures will inevitably show up of them like at a restaurant.
Yeah, and they're like, and they tried to do There's been a couple times they tried to like put them on like TV for like what was it, 60 minutes or whatever, and then like after like 5 days they shut the experiment down. They're like, no, you're actually gonna die. And then they gave the excuse.
Guy who started the breatharian. The guy who started the breatharian cult got busted at McDonald's. Oh yeah. And then he tried to make the argument that part of being a breatharian requires you to eat one very specific meal at McDonald's.
Yeah, it's
like once a month.
The McRib was that, and that's a key tenet of breatharianism.
It's the full name is McDonald's Arianism.
All right, that's amazing.
Maybe dying is worse. Regulated capitalism with a strong safety net is the best system we have, based.
That is social democracy.
On the systems we actually have evidence on, which is to say probably quite a bit more welfare than we currently have in the US. It's unreasonable to advocate for hypothetical.
She's a neoliberal and she wants a stronger safety net in the US. What?
Also, this is such a tautological argument because she's saying we can't do this until we have evidence for it, right? Well, how do we get the evidence for it without doing it? How do we test that? Like, how do we run a scientific control test on communism? Yeah. Like, it is such like it's just the evidence isn't there. But we can't argue for something hypothetical, which is why we need, hypothetically, more welfare in the United States. Like,
yeah.
How do you know? We haven't tested that. Maybe that would be bad.
Yeah. Also, Swamp Cat in the chat says, breatharianism with McDonald's characteristics. I just want to shout that out. All right, let's keep watching.
Yeah.
Alternatives from untested to repeated failures. Again, you can't just reason out the ideal economic system for humans or for a particular country without evidence in practice. That's not being rational, it's not being scientifically minded, it's being dogmatic. I've talked before about how not all use is abuse. The same goes for exploitation, which refers to unfair use. Some vegans say you can't be vegan unless you are socialist or communist, but there's nothing in the term or the definition that is anti-capitalist.
I mean, yes, it's true. You could be a vegan and a neoliberal if you were just ideologically inconsistent and you actually cared more about animals than about, poor people. I feel like it would be like veganism isn't just about animals, really, at the end of the day. It's about, causing the least amount of harm. It's like an overall like choice. It doesn't just involve animals, it involves like everyone. I don't know. That's the way that I look at
it. To me, like the idea of you say you're vegan because you don't want to hurt or kill animals. The idea that you don't want to hurt or kill humans should have been implied. Like you really shouldn't have to specify that.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah. I mean, like,
yeah.
I mean, you could do this if your like ideology is essentially just that community meme of I can excuse human suffering, but I draw the line at the mistreatment of animals.
Yeah.
If that is sincerely what you believe, then yeah, you can do that.
Yeah. Like no, absolutely.
If you're very poisoned by ideology, I can see the idea of like, I don't consider capitalist exploitation to be exploitation because they could just choose not to involve themselves in it, whereas an animal can't make that choice, you know?
Right.
That's wrong. That would be like an argument I could see her making, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I guess like, animals are cute. Some animals are cuter than people even. So, I mean, maybe it's about that. But if I was like if I had to save one of two people from a burning building, or a person or an animal, and I didn't know anything about either of them, I would just generally pick a human just because I'm on the same, I'm on team human at the end of the day, if that's all I know about the two things. And if you're going to be a vegan and you're going to be like, but it's fine if we, exploit all these other people, I feel like that's just like inconsistent at the end of the day. It's like you're valuing animals over people. I don't know. It's
also like, I'm very curious to see how she's going to square the idea.
I'm not sure she is.
She's not, but spoiler alert, she's not. But like, all exploitation of animals is like rooted in the profit mode. Like everything she complains about is designed specifically to like wring as much money out of animals as possible. So like without that motivation, there would be no reason to do that to animals. It should be what she wants.
She's like, I think McDonald's should still exist. They should just only serve vegan options. All right, let's keep watching.
So the argument something like, veganism means no exploitation. Exploitation is capitalism. Therefore, veganism means no.
This is the best argument of her entire thing. It makes sense.
She fundamentally does not understand the arguments people would make against her, because exploitation is not always capitalism. You can exploit someone without it being capitalism.
Yeah. Exploitation is capitalism. It's like, what? Yeah, okay. It's a bit of a straw man.
Capitalism
it's still better than
always exploitation. But that's true. Roger is a dog. Dogs have fleas. Roger has fleas. Like it's.
Yeah. If you look up exploitation in the thesaurus, it's not like synonym capitalism. I don't know what Marxist is secretly working for Merriam-Webster, but all right, let's keep going.
Capital. Two very big problems with this. First, you have to accept the very specific.
Two very big problems with this argument I made up as a straw man.
Specific Marxist definition of exploitation/capitalism, which is essentially begging the question when you define anti-exploitation as requiring.
What does begging the question mean? That's a philosophy thing, right?
Begging the question is circular reasoning. That's the actual philosophy definition of begging the question. I'm not sure if she's using it correctly.
Also, she's wrong.
Yeah,
she's also wrong because if you look at the dictionary definition of the word exploitation, and I'm not talking about like from Capital, I'm talking about the dictionary. The first definition given for exploitation,
edition of Capital,
is to make full use of something. So, unless you're arguing that employers are not making full use of their employees, it's suffice to say they are being exploited.
That's true. All right, let's keep watching.
Marxism find capitalism as inherently exploitative. I don't see any reason to accept this definition, the Marxist definition of exploitation. I think it's much better defined as unfair use, and what exactly that means is a lot more complex. Is there sometimes or even often exploitation in capitalistic systems? Of course. There are unambiguous cases, like obvious cases of exploitation, like wage theft and broken contracts. The same with animal agriculture. No choice is given to the animal, obviously. And obviously...
There we go.
Before we move on to the actual argument here, she just breezed past the two examples she gave of exploitation are things that are explicitly illegal in capitalist societies. She can't even acknowledge the fact that like yeah, some jobs make you work too hard. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you like it's
Yeah.
Or I mean, like, yeah, the inequalities in terms of the law of even like how those things are explicitly illegal. That those are much lesser crimes than, say, an employee just stealing from the register. Even though like an employer just like miswriting, like, you know, misrepresenting how many wages people worked and just doing wage theft is much less illegal than that.
And also to say like, oh yeah, there are cases of that happening. You know, it's happened a few times. But like if you look at the numbers, wage theft is like by far the biggest form of theft.
Yeah.
It all other theft combined does not equal the amount of wage theft. You know, it's
that is so true. That is a radicalizing infographic, if there ever was one, seeing the wage theft versus all other theft combined. It's not even close.
Also, Amazing Wolf Skeptic just saying, and she doesn't name any sources for communism. That is a good point. She is being pretty thorough in terms of her other sources, but her sources of communism is the nightmare she invented in her mind.
I mean, yeah, she says
the
Marxism. Thing is, that's like her.
You can't refute what she's saying because she's not giving like a number. You know, she's just saying went badly in other places. She's not saying why. She's not saying what the problem is. She's just left that, like, you'll take that for granted. So there's no way to refute what she's saying. There's no way to go, no, it didn't. That didn't happen. Because anyone could just say, oh, it went poorly. You know, and then if the 100 million death number is not real. It's like, well, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about famine. You know.
I also want to shout out Cursey Boo in the chat. If I pay a cow a wage to eat it, is that vegan? That's a good question.
It's impossible for there to be any sort of fair exchanged or any sort of deal made. So yeah, pretty unambiguous exploitation. There's also a strong case to be made for exploitation in the breakdown of regulatory systems, like monopolies, but that doesn't mean we can't understand how to evaluate fair exchanges. Do we have a long way to go in creating a fairer market via regulation? Certainly. Arguably, we still struggle.
Why is she pro-regulation and a neoliberal? Okay, whatever. We've been
because she doesn't know what a neoliberal is why.
That's the answer, yeah.
With monopoly.
To say...
But that...
Go ahead, Tonslin.
I can't.
Okay.
Doesn't mean communism is the answer. Which brings me to the second problem. There is no evidence for a practicable alternative. The reason we can say animal agriculture is wrong is because we have well-established alternatives. We know humanity can survive on a plant-based diet. We can grow plants, we can grow only plants, we can feed the world's population, and we can do it without animal products. We just need a shift in the market, one product instead of another. If there were evidence that veganism had the same catastrophic consequences that communism does, like we couldn't grow plants without manure, or we didn't know how to make B12, then we couldn't say animal agriculture is wrong. We couldn't advocate for its abolition because we would have no viable alternative, unless or until like clean meat were a thing. Morality is a product of choice. When it comes to dietary habits and food production, we have a choice, and we need to start making the right choice. When it comes to economics, the claim that we have a viable choice in communism just is not true. None of this means that we shouldn't research economic theory and try to find something better. Just like in the hypothetical can't be vegan world, hopefully we would research how to make B12, how to farm without manure. What it does mean is that it's wrong to advocate for abolishing capitalism based on
longer earlier in this video saying that you can't reason yourself into a perfect economic system. And now she's saying, oh, we should still look into it. We should still do the research and you know. But because in her mind, the people who are qualified to do that are like the fucking think tanks and fucking economic ghouls that liberal technocrats think should be in control of policy. Is why she can speak out of both sides of her mouth like that.
Yeah.
When the part with the Beyond Meat thing where it was like a cow's face and then she put the Beyond Meat or what was it, Impossible Burger or whatever over top of it, like, I don't know. I feel like that is putting too much giving too much credit to the idea that like you vote with your wallet. If more people become vegan, then we'll just not buy meat and it'll go away. And it's just not that simple, you know? Like, even though, I don't know, I'm kind of like stealing this from Mexi's video about vegan TM, but she's like, even though that there's more vegans every year, meat consumption also goes up like every year. And that like it isn't enough just to be like, well, personally, I'm going to make the choice. Although I agree, it is the ethically correct choice to make, to not eat meat anymore and, you know, not consume animal products. It's not enough. Like, under capitalism, it's not going to actually just stop, you know, these incredibly wealthy
like
company.
Obviously, like, we shouldn't be like, you know, counting on like corporations to do the right thing, but like I am actually fairly optimistic about the way that like fake meat is like going. Like my
I can't wait for that.
Like my theory about this is like with stuff like people will like I've seen so many people say stuff like you know, fast food restaurants serving Beyond Meat or whatever is like just a marketing scheme, which I think is probably true to some extent, but also like that is, I think, the direction that they want it to go, because like you look at the way that fast food restaurants work, everything is made for like maximum efficiency, everything is like broken down to its composite pieces and reconstituted. The least efficient thing at any fast food restaurant is the meat, of like having to like grow an animal that they have to like grow food for. And like I do kind of see a future where like the situation will become that like animal grown meat will become this like luxury thing, whereas for most people it will just be fake meat.
I also feel like the mechanism for this change is unclear to me, because she seems to be arguing that it's a matter of personal responsibility for each individual to make the choice to go vegan, but like that there must be a meat industry, that they simply have to consume different things in order to be morally correct. But like, if we take that logic at its face, right, then surely it should also be everyone else's responsibility to not exploit people and to not use them for their own profit and like steal surplus value from them, right? Like, the moral framework she's using just falls apart on the slightest inspection. If you have even like a clue what the criticisms of capitalism are. And I'm not saying you even have to agree with them. I'm sure you could construct an argument against them that's better than this, but Jesus Christ.
Oh boy. All right, let's keep going.
Based on some hypothetical work and basically a leap of faith. I'm not the vegan police. I don't like to tell people they're not vegan or fake vegan or anything like that. That said, I do think that anti-capitalist sentiment is inherently anti-vegan, at least currently. Okay. If we also mean the human animal, when we talk about animals and the definition of veganism, and you know, clearly anti-capitalists do, otherwise human economics would be irrelevant, then cruelty to humans is not vegan. Trying to push an entire society into, at best, an unknown situation, putting countless
not where I thought this was going,
lives at risk within that society based on personal ideology.
I just
11% of the world's population is starving right now.
Yeah.
Like, the idea, I would love to see her explain this to like someone mining cobalt in the third world. Like, oh well, we just don't want to do something that's going to put your life at risk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
you can't change this system.
Oh boy. Oh wow. This is this is very spicy. This is I did not think I'd be that surprised by her logic, but oh boy, that's great.
Logical reasons.
Like, I mean, I don't know. Did you have like, where did you think this was going? Like,
I thought where she would go with it was she would go in a direction of communism leads to totalitarianism, which means that you would be unable to agitate for the rights of animals.
Yeah.
In my head, that's where I thought she was going. But
I mean,
like, that's a much better argument than the one she made.
Wildly backwards.
That's much more charitable. I thought that she was going to be like, yeah, well, the communist dictator is going to make you eat hamburgers.
Remember, this is a bit off topic, but remember when Sebastian Gorka was at the what was it?
Oh God, yes.
The RNC or whatever, and he was
Yeah.
like, "The Green New Deal. They're gonna take away your hamburgers. It's what Stalin dreamed of but never achieved." Like the exact
Stalin was a
opposite
militant vegan.
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, no.
Honestly, I would
Then he
love to
bravely
see.
ate a hamburger.
Once this pandemic
Which I
is
thought,
over,
wow.
I would love to see a monk debate between Sebastian Gorka and her.
Yeah, like they've. Turns out they agree on a lot.
Yeah. She came out, you know, he learned a lot. He's a vegan now, and she's a member of the
he became a
Metezi
vegan. He became a vegan neoliberal.
Yeah,
It's easy.
and she is now a fascist.
The desire to tear down, for no credible reason, any and all capitalistic systems.
For no reason at all.
Suffering that has always inevitably resulted is cruel.
Well, you know, it's so good that there's never been a famine under capitalism.
Yes.
It's so good that everybody's fed and everybody's got full bellies and everyone's got all of their basic needs met right now.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, she would look like a real hypocrite right now.
No, I mean, and like, and it's you know, with the, like, at the beginning of the pandemic in March, when all the grocery stores were all like, you know, everything was out, that was socialism. That's what that was, you know,
socialism.
Socialism is when the grocery,
I couldn't buy toilet paper.
Their bread lines. That's the definition.
And I think it's pretty fair. It's also pretty fair, I think, to compare like the first couple hundred years of communist history to capitalist history, because, you know, the first couple of years, 100 years of capitalism, the Gilded Age, very good time for a lot of people. No real exploitation there. Nothing there that would make you think, oh, maybe this system isn't working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely agree. Also, I've never really checked into how non-white people fared during that time. But yes,
no.
I'm sure you're right.
Hard to say.
This is off topic. I heard this term, primitive accumulation. I'm just gonna take a big sip of wine and Google that really quick.
All right.
Yeah.
Should we keep going?
Let's keep going.
Let's go.
Is not saying intent doesn't matter. It does when we're talking about, you know, someone's personal character. But look, when we're talking about animal agriculture, the intent isn't cruelty there either. The intent is to produce a product and to make money. It's the outcome which is harmful, and the indifference.
Why is that the intent? Why do you think that intent exists? What do you think it is? Why are they incentivized to do something so morally reprehensible simply to make money?
I don't think intent is any excuse in the face of overwhelming evidence of harm, and ideological blindness to that harm is no excuse. And going back to the second part of the definition of veganism, by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives for the benefit of animals, humans, and the environment. So no part of veganism as a moral choice makes any sense outside of a standard economic model of supply and demand. Without capitalism, eating plant-based is just symbolic, you know, promoting personal consumer actions and boycotts and alternatives as meaningful makes no sense. The presumption of a capitalistic context, a capitalistic society, is part of the definition of veganism.
Okay, I mean,
what?
Like, so, like,
I think it's
if I'm understanding her argument correctly, it's that she believes that like communism will necessarily lead to like an authoritarian rule, will like, you know, like lead to like whatever atrocities, billion dead, whatever, and like there's plenty to disagree with there, and obviously we all do, but like, I mean, it's just like ridiculous to me that she's completely unable to recognize the suffering that occurs under capitalism, and like, because if she believes that like, yeah, communism would cause this many people to die and that would be like non-vegan because there'd be this amount of human suffering, like, she's wrong about the facts there, but that is not a totally incoherent argument. But to not apply that same scrutiny to capitalism is just absurd.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's maybe worth asking, like, what would veganism look like under a, you know, like actually existing communist world if they were like, presumably a communist world would be able to provide food to everyone, and maybe that would include meat, like depending on what kind of thing we're thinking about. What would a vegan do in that situation? Like, what would that look like? I don't know. I mean, maybe that's
I could speak to that a little bit. The idea, like, if we arrange the economy so that it served human need rather than profit, right now, in order to, like, the amount of soy that we use to feed a cow, it's like 10 to 1.
Right.
The amount of calories that go into the cow versus the calories that are produced. So if we wanted to feed the most people, we would just feed them the soy directly, and they could get like 10 times the nutrition out of it. So the only reason, to say that socialism reduces veganism to a personal choice is ridiculous to me, because she's the one making the argument that, like, in order to stop this, we all just have to vote with our wallet. She's the one making an argument of, like, benevolent consumption here.
Yeah, and it just speaks to an ignorance of what socialism actually is, and what people are actually talking about. Again, she assumes that socialism is just a transitory state to a communist world that's
communist world, by the way, also means billion dead.
Famines. Yeah. It's like one of the things Marx talked about was you got to famine people and give them famines.
You got to famine.
Communism is when you do famine, and the more famines you do, the more communist it is. And in that sense, it is anti-vegan because you're not eating any plants. You're not eating anything.
Yeah,
true. That's true. Oh, what about all the wheat?
Denial of capitalism or opting out of capitalism in principle, not only does this make vegan ethics irrelevant, it fails to do good in the most cogent way that veganism acts on the world, by changing production. It's a failure to be vegan in any sense, from ethical principle to consequence. So again, I'm not going to call vegans who happen to be anti-capitalist not vegans.
Sorry.
Yeah, she understands
opting out of capitalism makes veganism irrelevant because it has no effect on production.
Right. Which, that's the only way you can do it.
It's the only thing. It's the main thing it affects. That's what it's for. It's the whole idea. Like, what do you...
yeah. It's brutal.
The ideology of anti-capitalism seems inherently at odds with veganism, at least for now. I don't have any political ideology. I'm not...
Yes.
Oh my
God.
I'm not committed to that. I'm not even committed to neoliberal. It's just kind of the closest.
I mean, just sorry to bother you. Oh my God, he admitted.
I think you should leave.
I think you should leave. Sorry.
Oh my God, he.
Yeah. I mean, I don't believe anything. If you think about it, what I believe is really just the default option, and everyone else is the one with the political ideology.
Yeah.
It speaks to a lack of imagination more than anything else. Just like, wait, if things were communist, it would be different. And I only know how to be a vegan under capitalism. So that means that anti-capitalism is anti-vegan, is really what their thought process seems to be.
To what I currently believe in terms of politics. I think the only kind of label I fervently defend for myself would be consequentialist, but I am definitely anti-capitalism and communism. There is no evidence for it being anything other than a horrible, dangerous political theory when put into practice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully that explained things a little bit better in terms of my views and how that relates to veganism, because that's the most important thing. How does it
have to go take a rage piss?
Yeah, that's that was rough.
Go for it.
Yeah.
You sure that toilet.
Yeah.
Boss.
I do love the here, let me just turn off my thing so I'm not you're not seeing double me. Oh, okay.
Oh, that's 2 Sams too many.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just amazing in terms of just talking about capitalism as the default ideology. No, I don't want to see her plug her Patreon at all. Mm. Oh, James is muted.
Am I muted?
Is this better?
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me now? Hey.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. It's because I had to like this is boring stuff for everyone else, but I had to like rebuild my because my mic stopped working. I like built that into my streaming thing that captures my audio, and because of that, I had to remake a new audio setup, and so now there's two, and I'm not sure which one works and which one isn't.
Mackenzie Iyer heading out. Good to have you, as
Mackenzie
always.
Iyer, thanks so much. Always a pleasure, never a chore.
The Amazing Wolf Skeptic. I'm an anti-capitalist. Well, yeah, that's what it's all about. Consequentialism. So, according to Wikipedia, consequentialism is a class of normative, teleological, ethical theories that holds that the consequences of one's conduct are the ultimate basis for any judgment about the rightness or wrongness of that conduct. Thus, from a consequentialist standpoint, a morally right act is one that will produce a good outcome. So I suppose this is where she gets the idea, like, well, if it was communism, then what would my veganism do? Which is looking at veganism as only a way of, like, as they say, voting with your wallet, right? Like voting with your money. But that's not all veganism is. It's not just a boycott.
I mean, to me, and maybe I'm sorry, I got a bit distracted. My roommate's friend might sell me a bed, so I'm excited about that. But
hell yeah, sleeping on the floor this whole time.
Yeah, man, and my back. It's true what they say about turning into your late 20s. As soon as you're 27, sleeping on the floor in a mess of dirty laundry, it hurts you.
Yeah.
But no, I mean So maybe I'm missing it. It seems to me like her argument is not so much wrong in that she it seems like her argument is much more wrong in terms of her understanding of communism than it is in terms of her defense of neoliberalism.
And it's also extremely wrong in that sense.
Yeah, I mean she misunderstands all these politics, but it doesn't seem like...
Other than that, she didn't have the slightest clue what she was talking about, and she got all of the things wrong. Other than that, it was fine.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was just that took us a while to get through, just because every line she said was wrong.
If you ignore every factual claim that she made, I'm trying to be fair to her, and so I think that if you ignore all of her factual claims or her not understanding any of the things that she talked about, honestly, it seems nice.
Yeah, she seems cool.
I don't think she's a bad person or whatever, but she definitely maybe should have done a little reading on the subject before presuming to lecture her audience about
That's
it.
Fair. Yeah.
I think also it's she never addressed her central position, which is that, and she acted like she did, which was very strange. She never actually demonstrated why anti-capitalism is anti-vegan. She just asserted that it was.
Yeah.
Her argument was, in my opinion, it is.
Well, I mean, wasn't her argument, and correct me if I'm wrong, I was saying to James, I was trying to buy a bed partway through that. But long story, my roommate's friend wants to sell her bed. But it seemed like her argument is essentially communism means a bazillion people die, and that would not be vegan. Therefore, communism is anti-veganism.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you accept the premise, if you accept the premise that it is necessary for millions of people to die, that would be anti-vegan.
Yeah,
sound argument.
I would posit, though, that if you ask the average communist, they would say, I don't want that to happen. Actually.
Making, bold assumptions.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, just to like, okay, actually existing socialist states like, you know, like Eastern Europe, USSR, or whatever, these people still ate meat. They didn't do the thing where they were like, well, it costs us less money, or it's less, you know, it's easier for us to feed everyone soy. It's easier for us to feed everyone a vegetarian diet. Meat was still a thing in that situation. So if you were living in that world, yeah, go ahead.
Counterpoint, though. Counterpoint, meat consumption has skyrocketed in the past, 100 years as capitalism has become the default economic system of the world. Like, if anything has accelerated the pace with which we eat and exploit animals, it is capitalism. The idea that, fucking Russian peasants in 1945 were eating big steak dinners is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's true. And it seems like most of the, you know, meat that we have is like from fast food and all these like enormous factory farms that are just destroying the environment. And you would think that a true socialist, you know, country at this point, maybe not, you know, 100 years ago, a socialist government that would arise now would be like, oh, actually, we don't want to destroy the environment with a bunch of like cow farts and pig feces. Maybe we should try and reduce our consumption at the very least.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, like, I feel like the criticism of saying that, like, you know, like the Soviets or like the Cubans like eat meat is like, I mean, is not a very strong one. Like, that you could advocate for veganism within a like communist state, and also, I mean, like looking at like, oh yeah, like, you know, 100 years ago people weren't like vegetarians is not strong, or vegans is not a good case to make.
Yeah. Amazing Wolf Skeptic in the chat says meat production under the Soviet Union tripled. John Duncan says also veganism being incompatible with capitalism doesn't mean eating meat is incompatible with socialism. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, exactly.
Or not eating meat is incompatible with socialism.
You define socialism as she does to mean the intermediary period between capitalism and communism. Communism, of course, going completely undefined.
He's like, I asked my 1 ML friend for a definition of socialism, and no one else.
But but if your entire premise is I'm going to explain why anti-capitalism is wrong, you should start out by saying what that is.
She never did define capitalism.
Or communism, or the only definition she gave was socialism as a step between capitalism and communism. Not what either of those things are.
Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Tubsifer in the chat. The Inuit I follow on Twitter have very few charitable things to say about white vegans. Where do you think the balance should be between the implementation of veganism on a global scale and the preservation of indigenous cuisines? And
I don't think anyone has the right to enforce their dietary restrictions on indigenous cultures. I think that it's you don't have a right to tell. Full stop. I don't think there is a mandatory implementation of veganism. I think that's just not going to happen.
No, and I mean, when it comes to a lot of indigenous cultures, like a lot of them, like are just essentially a part of the natural ecosystem. Are not. Like Inuit people are not factory farming in the Arctic. They're like eating very sustainably.
Like the seal hunt is like a big cultural, you know, thing for Inuits, and it's not that they're not hunting the seal to extinction in the same way that, you know, other ways of doing this kind of shit would be. Like they are doing it in a sustainable way. So no, we don't need to necessarily say that everyone needs to be vegan. If it's, I mean, I don't know. I think it's a fair question. I think that white vegans in particular have a pretty bad reputation. with things like this. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well deserved. I think PETA has come out against the seal hunt in like a big way, and like there's a lot.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm from Newfoundland, where there were protests against the seal hunt every summer. Like fucking Pamela Anderson and Paul McCartney would come and protest the seal hunt. And I'll tell you, a large part of that is the fact that the people doing it are extremely poor. So it's a lot easier to come and bully them than it is to like protest KFC.
Yes. Yeah. And like, what's the bigger problem on like a global level?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing skeptic. I didn't hear about this, but correct me if I'm wrong. But in the 1970s, didn't the Canadian government slaughter seals in order to starve out the Inuit? That sounds like something they would do. I don't know. That's the same strategy they use with the buffalo.
That seems like a very them thing. Yeah. I mean, like I don't know. I don't know where I would draw the line in terms of like I feel like with Indigenous people, it is like extremely clear that it's like it should not be, like deciding that like no, you have to become vegan now. But with like certain religious groups, I don't know where I would like say the line is where it's like, oh yeah, like eating meat is part of your religion, but I wouldn't say I necessarily value that to the same extent as like Indigenous people.